Find your path with the knowledge of others and become an illuminator for those who struggle. Guide their way just by being true and being in alignment, because it comes naturally to you. On self-discovery wisdom, we share to find inspiration with lessons for millions. We hope you listen.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Sara's View of Life, right here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. I'm your host, Sara Try. Well, if you've been following me, I've been kind of reviewing my decades. I've already done decade 1, 2, and 3, and right now we're looking at my 4th decade, my 30s to my 40s. Quite an interesting time. In my 30s, life wasn't something I was simply living. It was something I was holding together. On the outside, it looked like I was doing it all, raising my own 3 children, building businesses, a clothing shop called Tabytha's Were Unusual, creating opportunities, moving between places, traveling back to England to see family, popping over to the States to go shopping and taking the kids off to Disneyland and Seattle. And there was movement, there was momentum, there was creation, but beneath it all, there was a constant stretching of self. My son was born when I was 30, just 20 days after, or 18 days after my 30th birthday, my son Tyler. And when he was about a year and a half, I opened up a store called Tabytha's Were Unusual. And we had designer clothing and bought clothing, and it was slow to start, and I was gathering momentum. And then one day I come into the store, well, the police called me, and my store had been raided. This was just before Expo 86, and the area, although it was kind of prime real estate once Expo opened up, was still a little bit of a dubious area. And I was kind of forward thinking, knowing that, it was going to be a hot area. But unfortunately, it was the ladies of the night's haunt, and they had broken in and taken virtually all of my stock. It took 8 months to get the insurance back, didn't have the money to start it up again, and that was the end of Tabytha's Were Unusual. And then, kind of creating opportunities in other ways and moving between places. When Tyler was 2.5, we moved into East Van and a cute little house. And we had how many years there? 3 years, no, a little bit more. And we renovated it when I was pregnant with my 3rd daughter, Natasha. And we had a buzzing life. I was part of the community where the community center, there was a mum and tops group, and I was on the board and, big participant in things. I had my best friend, Jan Burney, and her kids, and we would do a lot together. And, we would dim sum people. My husband at the time is Chinese, do a lot of dining out and dim sum, and I was all the one to plan events and house things, etc. And so it was just that momentum of 3 kids. He was out a great deal. He wasn't one to put them to bed or bath them, change diapers or do things like that, so I was pretty much on my own with that. Just you got things done. When my daughter had her first child, she turned around to me and said, like, how did you do it with 3 kids? And I said, I honestly don't know. I just did it. And I'm sure anybody with more than one child, you will know that you just get into a routine of just doing it, facing whatever it is you have to face. And when you look back, you kind of don't remember that. What you do remember are little things. Like my daughter is in one of those little space in those days. Now it's all stationary and the kids kind of jump up and down, but in those days it was on wheels. And this was Tasha, and she would kind of move herself around. And I had a phone that you pressed one number and it was a direct dial to my husband, and apparently she had pressed this number, and then on the other end, all he could hear was squealing. The kids were chasing each other. They were squealing. She was squealing. But all he's hearing is Blue Murder on the side, which was quite funny. My son was 2.5 when we moved into there. And both of my older children started school in that area. And, as I said, I was kind of very much a participant of what was going on. They read, the clothing store hadn't worked. And we had a restaurant when I was pregnant with Tabytha, and when I was pregnant with Tyler, we sold it. And my husband then had gone into real estate. But the real estate kind of kept him out until late nights for some reason, showing houses. Don't always know why, at 10 or 11 or 12. But, I later found out it was gambling and other things. But, it was a decade of me just getting through things, parties for the kids, taking them to events, in ballet, in dance, in soccer, and this and that, and just doing what you do as a mum with 3 small kids. And when my daughter was 2.5 in 1990, we moved out to a suburb called Coquitlam into a bigger house. And we were there for 17 years. And, that kind of gave my ex his excuse not to come home for dinner because it was too far from town. It was more the suburbs. And so yeah, again, it was like, raising 3 kids. The kids couldn't go into programs unless I was the one to take them. So had to always make sure that any of the programs that they were in were most certainly spaced out. They couldn't be at the same time because I couldn't be in 2 places at the same time. And with 3 kids and 3 programs, it was a bit of a juggling act. But my son was in lacrosse, he was in soccer. My daughter was in dance, they were in gymnastics. My son then took up later tennis when he was older, and they were in swimming. They still had these activities. And of course, I always had after school kind of tea where the kids can bring home their friends, and we have a little tea party where there was always something, cookies or whatever, and then it would be who's staying for supper, and very much kind of the neighborhood mom. um, and I loved those years of being with my children. Tiring, yes, of course, but I always wanted to be a mother. It was so important to me. And so, you know although you're juggling a lot, it's also kind of, the balancing act, isn't it? Trying to be everything to everyone, and basically at the cost of yourself, which happens a great deal. So yeah, but it's what motherhood is about. But this was the decade where, 2 or more children came into my life, Tyler and Natasha, and Tabytha was born in my 20s. Motherhood was not just a role, it was full immersion. My heart expanded. Yes, I was wanting to be a mother. I just absolutely loved my children, devoured them. But, the responsibility was high. There was no pause button, no time to sit back and say, how am I doing? Because life demanded that you keep going and keep showing up. And the dress store was an expression of something inside of me that needed to come alive, a creative person. But it wasn't just about fashion, it was about identity, about helping people feel seen, feel good, and feel confident, feel more in themselves. And, behind the scenes, it was long hours, financial pressure, constant problem solving. And the robbery then took it all. And then there came the restaurant, which came in 94 and was it 93, 94. And my ex and I invested in a restaurant with some other people. And I was only meant to work there at lunchtime as a hostess, kind of build rapport. We're taking it over from people that had been big there. And then it ended up with me having to work evenings. So I would drive back in the afternoon all the way to Coquitlam, which was half an hour, 40 minutes at that time of the day, get the kids settled, dinner, this, that, etc., and then get the babysitter in and then go back to work. And it just proved too much. I couldn't be the mother of 3 and have this dual job. It was okay in the lunchtime because they were at school, but not in the evening. And eventually, it became we had to get there was all sorts of other stuff going on with the partners. And unfortunately, my husband wasn't very good at getting kind of money out of that partnership. And it's a pity because, kind of enjoyed meeting the people and building up, a place for them to come to, which has always been something I've liked to do. But c'est la vie. And, there were those questions, those quiet ones that didn't always have space in my head. Who am I in all of this? And where do I fit in my own life? And is this what it's meant to be? And am I only here to serve others at my cost? But you don't stop. When you have children, it's 24/7. I remember one time actually, with my girlfriend Sue at the time, going to spend the weekend with her. My husband was going to have the three kids. I came back Sunday night to kind of find the kids on the ceiling. The place looked like a hurricane had gone through it. He was sleeping. The kids were like sugar high. I had to keep them home from school the next day because they were so riding high. And I said to him, what the hell went on? You only had a weekend. He said, you don't know how hard it is with three of them. Excuse me. I do this every day. You couldn't give me a weekend? Another time I went to go see a movie and he took them out for lunch and I was meant to meet up with them for dinner to find out that they had had a car crash. And so, yeah, there wasn't that kind of break where, I could leave them with him and go and take some time for myself. So it is what it is. So, there was a great deal of pleasure in it. What you really want in motherhood is that balance. You want your partner to be the partner, the father too, and equally kind of stepping up to the plate. And yes, he was the breadwinner, so that kind of made it like he's the breadwinner, I'm the housewife and raising the kids. But my job is 24/7. I didn't get a salary. I had to ask for the grocery money. I had to ask for gas money. I had to ask for everything because I was never given an allowance. And it kind of really came down to kind of control, which later I'll reveal. But it did teach me capability. It taught me endurance. It taught me how much I could carry. But it also quietly showed me the cracks, the places where I had abandoned myself in order to keep everything else afloat. And that is the deeper truth of my 30s. I joined a company called New Ways, which was, they had bought from the Ming Dynasty, when they uncovered all the terracotta soldiers and everything, they'd bought these recipes from China and developed all of these things, which were just marvelous. And, I've been an asthmatic all my life, and they had this wonderful pill called Revinol, and it was from the cordyceps mushrooms and it just oxygenated my lungs. And I started finding I could do things without having asthma attacks all the time. And it was just wonderful. And all of the herbs and the pills and things like this changed my life. I lost weight. I had more energy. I was healthier. At that point, I could be like 8 antibiotics a year. And here I am now kind of really being healthy as I had been in many, many years. And my kids were much healthier because I had them all on these nutrients. My son, which came a bit later, so he broke his leg and I had him on a nutrient that sealed up bone very quickly, but I'll talk about that one later. But, it was a time also of me kind of discovering that in health, how much I could do. And I was part of New Ways and selling it, but I'm a saleswoman for other people, but and I was a real advocate for what these nutrients and everything could do. But I'm also kind of hung up on the free will. I can show you what's there, but I can't make you buy it. And I'm not a pusher. And over the years, I've gone to many networking things, where it's not a pyramid, but the word's not coming to me, but you have different layers of people. And some of them are just so full of rah-rah and hype and people, wanting to get in there and kind of make money and sustainability, and the people at the top get rich and then it falls. And I just found, had a friend who was really hooked on those type of things and always dragged me along. Come on, Sara, come on, and it would be just another hype thing. And there are some good companies out there that do that, but it was it was kind of, is the intent real from the people at the top? New Ways was eventually bought over by other people, and they continued with some of the herbs and things, but not to the same extent. But it did kind of show me to kind of put a little bit of emphasis on my health, and having good health for a while was just really, really nice. So yes, it was a lot about discovery. I was the one at Christmas that had the Chinese family over for a big Christmas meal, and then I would have Christmas Day. We would always have somebody that was on their own there. Um, it was always about me entertaining. My ex-husband was the 4th of July. My best friend at the time was the 4th of July. And so I would do a dual party, always a theme party, and, really big. Um, my husband's 40th birthday. He used to be in a band when he was young, so we reacted the band. People brought over drums and guitars. Us wives were the background singers, and we had this huge deck outside, and we're singing and dancing, and he's playing, and that was his big 40th. And I was a doer. I mean, I'm still a doer, but I've just slowed down a great deal, and I can't do what I used to do, but I was a doer. And I was very into kind of fashion. My girlfriend Jan and I would go over the border and go down to Bellingham and buy, go to the shops and buy a whole load of clothes and then come back. And she and I were very efficient. We're dressing room opposite each other. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, and make the deals and then come back. And we did that often. And it was, how I got my wardrobe, because I can never spend a lot on clothes. So I had to always get them on a budget. And, with my children, there were places that you could buy last year's stock very cheaply. And that's so, I would spend 120 on 3 kids. That was like 500 or 600 really, the year before. So I knew how to dress them. And I tried my hand at sewing, but sewing and knitting aren't my thing. So as like, don't look at the seams. It's held together, but don't look at the seams. But yeah, I was very, very much, a hands-on mum, and I'd be involved in the school, taking absenteeism, calling the parents of the children, where are they? And later on did a lot more. So yeah, part of a play group, and and became head of the play group, and it was about exposing my kids. My ex would be, why am I not working and bringing in money? And then when I'm working, the kids are suffering. And then when I was volunteering, which was all around my children, I volunteered for like equivalent to 12 years for my 3 kids. It would be, why are you volunteering and not getting paid for it? So it's always about, why am I not bringing in the money? But then if it took time away, from the kids, then I'm being a bad mother. So in other words, I never won. So, how old was she? 93. We took all of the kids to Disneyland. Tasha was only 5, so she got what she got out of it. We took her back for her 10th birthday, which was a different experience. But we went to Disneyland. We went to England a couple of times. Well, one time as a whole family. I would go back every year or after year. With Tasha, because she was the youngest. The others could always go to friends' places and things, and it was easier for him to manage rather than, the youngest. And so I would go back and see my mom and family. She came over to stay with us for a while, and drove my ex mad, because she's a potato woman. And he said, if I never see another potato in my life, Um, and she moved here in 1990 with my brother for about 9 months, and then missed England too much, and they went back. But it's a pity. Had she had stayed, she would have had my support, the children's support, and it would have been much better for her in the end. And instead, they went back, and it ended up, her being bedbound, and my brother having to look after her and having a heart attack looking after her, and my sister getting a hernia looking after her. And had she stayed here, it would have been a total different ball game. So it's a pity. But yeah, life was busy. I was in my 30s. I still looked good. Never enough for my husband. I've gained weight, or I'm going older. It's like, I'm sorry, that's what happens to people my age, And And kind of towards the end of that, mid 90s, I started declining, getting rosacea, getting more infections, having more things happen that, like, I suppose life was kind of folding on itself to me, and it was getting harder to live through it. Um, to my husband, everything was all about image, and I'd gained weight or I looked different, and happens with three children when you're balancing things, and I think in a way he was ashamed of me. But also, whenever we did go to an event or a party, people always talked to me because I'm easy to talk to. And he would get jealous and jealous of people having conversations with me. Um, so there was no winning. So the strain on our marriage was already happening and it was really growing. But I was putting on a face, got it all under control. Excuse me, hiccups, managing it all. And I mean, he was great with the kids when they were young. He would play tiger. He would chase them around, or he would hide and he would spring out on them. But like when the kids got older, he found it harder to manage because they would start to question. Um, and I know he tried his best. He hadn't necessarily been brought up with a great example. So I know that he did try his best. But unfortunately, it's we should never have married. Um, we had us pool together, and we shouldn't have married. And I'm very grateful for the three children that he gave me, but it was his insecurities were really showing, and my strain of everything was beginning to really show. I know he was looking elsewhere, staying out longer and longer, and later, and gambling and etc. And we were falling apart. And then I was, I'm so loyal. I was trying to keep everything together. And the 30s, part of it was exploration and discovery, and part of it was crumbling. And and then the 40s would prove to be harder. But there were some good times. Um, I've never been a person to have a lot of friends. I'm very friendly, very outgoing, but I'm very selective on friends. My friend Jamboni has been my friend since my son was 7 weeks old. So, 41 and a half years, and still my friend. Her children are my, good friends with my kids. In fact, they've been best man and bridesmaids at each other's wedding, etc. And a few other people that I had as friends but have gone by the wayside now. But I've never kind of belonged to a pack. I've never belonged to a group, even though I did a lot of things in groups. I was always seen as a little different, a little out there. Um, my house was a house where, kids would come over to stay for dinner or sleepovers and things like that. And the next decade would prove to be kind of revealing on that. But it I've always wondered what it's like to, I mean, I would go to group events and I would be a part of it, but I was always considered that little bit different. I kind of didn't fit the mold. And I always was trying to fit a mold, but I didn't quite know which mold it was. How do I fit into this mold? And how do you take somebody that is air and mold it? And it was very, very difficult. So, like I'm very friendly, constantly entertaining, and mum's morning and kids' parties and this, that, etc. But I never quite clicked. And that's been me all my life, even to this day. But that's okay. For a long time, I was so lonely, lonely that no one got me, no one saw me, nobody, like they were drawn to me, but at the same time repelled from me. And it's like, no one saw me, Sara. They saw what they wanted from me, or the exuberance of me. And, you know, my illness started kind of coming about in the early 40s and late 30s, and it would prove to be very, very different then. So it wasn't just about raising children or trying to run a business or moving through life. It was about slowly realizing that somewhere in all that doing, I was beginning to lose connection with me. This one carries some weight, this decade. I held it together. But at what cost? That realization would be the doorway to the next decade. I encourage all of you to, whether you do a video or you write it down, revisit your decades. It's a good way to look back at the obstacles you've overcome, where you got lost along the way, how you refound yourself, all the milestones and the triumphs along the way. And it's good to revisit it, but I think it's also good to leave your family or even share with your family and friends, because they see the facade, but do they see the layers underneath? And whether you leave it as something with your will or whether you share it along the line, I just highly recommend that you share it. And of course, you know, I go deeper into the layers in my book, Sara's Self-Discovery to Soul Living, which you can find on Amazon. And, you know, that was an observation of my life, the bird's eye view, the things that I faced and how I overcame them. And I didn't go into nasty details. It was just like, this happened, and this is what happened because of that happened, and this is what's happening now because of what happened. But I do, you know, I do suggest that you document your decades. It's good to have that review. Take a look at your life and how far you've come, and to remember you still got so far to go. And maybe you're traveling with a different view of your life. So until next time, folks, bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show. There are so many more for you to listen to right here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. Come and hear the illumination that's going to shed light on your path.
Find your path with the knowledge of others.